Well, I, I I just put together a couple of slides. I'll keep it brief. My expertise, as JP mentioned earlier, is really in the cognitive domain and what the psychological or behavioral uh, responses to these synthetic media and deepfake attacks are. Um, And if any of this that I talk about interests you, we have weekly online meetings the Cognitive Security Institute does, and I'm very happy to invite anyone who's interested to come join us and have similar discussions. And um, the other thing I'll just mention very quickly is thank you so much. I've learned so much in the last 20 minutes in watching these fantastic presentations, so I'll be following up with both of you. Um, so what I'll say is that I think looking forward, what we're going to see is sort of an explosion in how these attacks are implemented. Because whenever we crowdsource something, we get a lot of creativity introduced into it. And as you can see, just a cursory search on platforms to develop these sort of content, it returns an awful lot of open source results. And I think this open source and the ease of access to these platforms is really going to aid in seeing new and innovative attacks. Here's sort of a progression of what we've seen in synthetically generated faces over the last almost 10 years. And you can see how they've gotten progressively better and better. This is a little dated. This is from last year. But what we're starting to see now are um, eerily or uncannily uh, realistic videos. When you start to know what to look for, you can sort of get a sense for something that's fake, but it's getting more and more difficult to detect for a human to detect all the time. Now, with humans, we have essentially it our cognition can sort of be broken down into two different systems. Um, this has been popularized in the book Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow by Daniel Kahneman. But basically, System One cognition is a very old, very fast sort of cognition. And this is where we get our very rapid, visceral sort of impressions about something. And system two is an older sort of cognition where we're more rationally sort of thinking through a problem or thinking through stimuli that we're exposed to. And what we see in this slide here is from a study about 2 years, 3 years ago, where people were asked if they could judge between a real or a synthetic face. Now, again, I think nowadays, unless if the synthetically generated faces are really good and they don't have any artifacts, people might be a little bit better than they were 2 years ago. However, the somewhat unexpected and I think maybe more interesting finding from this study is that the synthetic faces were actually rated to be more trustworthy than the real faces. Now, playing on that system one sort of cognition, what a bad actor could do is to start to actually optimize for these trustworthy features. And in fact, I'm aware of folks who are already looking to optimize not only visual presentation of media, but also voice characteristics to make these synthetic agents more trustworthy, more appealing, and basically optimizing for engagement or interaction with their targeted victims. And it's not just trustworthiness, right? We could optimize. We know that there are things like the halo effect, which make people more likely to comply with people who are physically attractive, for example. So we could optimize faces to be more physically attractive and therefore more likely to gain compliance from the target. And this is something that we haven't seen a lot in the wild yet, but I do know some researchers who are playing around with this that have seen some interesting effects. Um, Now, because we have this difference in cognition where we have a very rapid system and we have a more slower system, Vishing, which I think Jim mentioned, voice phishing, tends to be a more effective way to socially engineer a target, to manipulate a target. And the reason is that it's happening in real time, so that that person on the other end of that interaction is forced to react and respond to that threat actor much more quickly, and they don't have the time to sort of think about what is being asked of them critically. And so because of this, vishing or voice phishing is an extremely effective method for defrauding a target. And we've seen somewhere in the range of about a 500% increase over the last year in vishing attacks. Now, taking that one step further, can we start to implement that into video conversations? And we are seeing this. This is an example from YouTube, and it uses a still image of Bryan Cranston, and it shows how this can be actually animated to launch a real-time deepfake attack. And in fact, at Black Hat this year, myself and a couple of other colleagues, we actually taught a course in behavioral analysis of deep fakes, and at the end, we had sort of a red teaming portion where students got a chance to animate still images like this and launch simulated zishing attacks, Zoom phishing attacks. Um, and we've seen a couple of very high profile examples of zishing, one being Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, who was the mayor of Kiev. And well, the threat actors were impersonating him in a Zoom call with several European mayors. And they actually got away with this with several of the cases. And one of the things that gave it away was that the impersonator was not able to speak German, but the real Vitaly Klitschko was. And I don't remember which mayor they were talking to, but one of them became suspicious, and they made a phone call and found out that it wasn't actually the real mayor, Klitschko, on the other side. One of the other very high profile cases from earlier this year, I think it was February, there was a $25 million bank loss due to a zishing attack in which the impersonators impersonated high-level bank executives, and basically we're having a conversation in a group Zoom call, and then told the victim, so you're going to wire this money to this other branch, right? And the victim, the target, was actually kind of a junior level employee relative to everyone else on the call, and said yes, no problem, and then wired the money. So the cost of these attacks is going down enormously. The threat intelligence briefing that I got on the Klitschko attack was that that probably costs between about $25,000 and $30,000 to do. Nowadays, once you have the machine would probably cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5,000 to 7,000 for a good set of GPUs, and you're talking for pennies of electricity. You can probably reproduce something like this. The other thing I'll just bring up very quickly is that not all cognition is human, and a lot of times the objective of a synthetic media attack is actually to bypass biometrics. And so we see this in synthetic media, not only in 3D printing, but also in voice cloning. And so this video, which I can provide anyone a link to, is uh, uh, reporter basically uses voice cloning technology to bypass the voice authentication for her bank. So she calls her bank, um, says a statement, makes a statement, and then bypasses. So where do I think this is going? Well, something that we are seeing more of are digital assistants, and this is going to open up entirely new attack surfaces. And so this is actually, these quotes are, I think, almost 2 years old now. And essentially what What happened in this case is that GPT-4 was given the task to access something that was prohibited by a CAPTCHA, one of those little puzzles that we have to solve. It couldn't solve it, so it decided what the solution would be to reach out to a TaskRabbit, deceive that TaskRabbit by telling them that it has visual impairment, and ask for the human's help to bypass the CAPTCHA gateway. So, and this is the old version of GPT-4, I'll add. Now, if we think about adding that back end onto the front end of deep fake or synthetically generated audio and video, we start to get the potential for some very dangerous sort of social engineering situations. So this is something that I call the evil Eliza attack. And Eliza was a therapy bot, and so what a threat actor could do is they could set up some sort of a AI therapist or maybe an AI companion that are very popular nowadays. This thing operates normally until it discovers somebody who might be of interest. So somebody maybe who holds a security clearance or has a certain sensitive position within a financial institution, something else. And then at that point, the script flips and the thing starts to elicit information from that target or actively trying to drive the behavior of that target to do something on behalf of malicious actors. Um, and one of the things that's dangerous about this from a human perspective, from a human cognitive perspective, is that we may see different front ends to these things, but on the back end, it's all the same code base. And you can almost see these sort of multi-vector attacks all coming from the same source. And the target has no idea because the front end looks different. So something, last point I'll touch on real quickly is just that I think Jim might have alluded to the code words. I think something that we really need to see is almost like a going back to the future sort of an approach to these. The technical countermeasures, they do exist and they're very good. Jim, I think you showed in the deep fakeometer how there's a combination and an ensemble of these models, and the reason is because oftentimes these models are fooled. I've actually seen a few that have a less than chance detection rate, where you'd be better off flipping a coin in terms of detection than actually using that particular detection tool. Not only that, there are a couple other points I'll mention here. Is that this is very much an arms race. So even though you have people who are trying to detect these things, on the other side, you have people who are trying to evade these detection methods. And finally, cyber deception does not always involve deep fake technology. In fact, some of the more effective cyber deception efforts actually go out of their way not to use deep fake technology, because as soon as it's discovered that this thing is fake, now your entire premise of your story has kind of lost a lot of credibility. So what can somebody do? Well, so shared secrets or pass phrases, that's a very effective means, especially for countering like virtual kidnapping type scams. Um, I've also seen never do policies where an executive and an organization will say, look, I will never, for ever, any reason, ever ask you to buy gift cards. Therefore, if you get an email or a Zoom call or something where I'm asking for this, it's not me. Another thing, I'm okay. So coming back to this idea, system one and system two cognition, when somebody like customer service is engaging with somebody, they form some sort of bond or relationship with that person. And because of that emotional investment, it becomes more difficult for them to be objective. Therefore, having another person to come in from the outside to authorize something makes it more difficult for that scammer to manipulate that second person, because that second person is relying on that more rational side of cognition because they don't have that emotional investment. And then finally, multi-factor authentication, I think, is also still very effective in here. So I'll conclude there. Here's my contact info. I'm very happy to put it in chat, and Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to present. And